that's the case, if they're doing a lot of tactical work, then that tactical work has to have a consistent brand message, because then people will still reflect back to the brand. And I think that's...
Hey everybody, my name is Andrew Tran. I'm a digital strategist and performance coach. I help business owners and team leaders perform better by giving them the tools they need in order to lead their teams to identify and solve challenges that are ahead of them, look at ways to align resources they need in order to solve those challenges, and then finally look at ways to measure success for their business objectives. In this series, I talk to leaders in their own field and we discuss how they got to where they need to be from their career trajectory. We look at and we also discuss current topics that are in play, especially those that affect brand, marketing, advertising. And finally, we look at tips to help businesses reach their business objectives through customer experience. My next guest is Mark Pickering. He is a creative agency owner. He's a digital strategist. He's a business director. He's from New Zealand, now based in Singapore. He has over 20 years of experience working with multi-million-dollar brands from all around the world. Some of the organizations he's worked with include Diageo, Vodafone New Zealand, Dyson, Unilever, Facebook, Ford, and Asahi, to name a few. He's currently the creative strategist and APAC business director for Chimney, which is a creative and content studio specializing in brand marketing and entertainment experiences. They've got offices in 13 cities around the world. And a bit of fun fact as well, he is a DJ. He speaks passionately when it comes to mental health. He's an entrepreneur and he's also a speaker in his own right. So without further ado, let me introduce you to Mark Pickering.
Hey Mark, how's it going?
Oh, it's good. How are you? How's it in Vietnam?
Everything in Vietnam is okay. We just lifted the lockdown, or lockdown. And people are walking around. You're starting to see pollution creep up a touch more now.
Can you go to bars and stuff? Or
no, not yet. From what I hear, it's bars and gyms are still shut. And I think rightly so, because if you just lift the ban on everything, the first two big places people will go to will be the gym, because they have to work off all the fat that they've probably consumed and built staying at home, and also bars as well, because they're just like cabin fever. They want to get out. But how's things over in Singapore for you?
Well, we've just had our lockdown extended by another month, so things are. It's interesting times. It really is. I don't, the government had framed things up as being everything's good. We're open for business. Life as usual. There was a rumor that went around that they were going to go into lockdown. We got told by a WhatsApp group message saying, don't believe rumors. Rumors are not true. And then a week later, they went into lockdown, but called it the circuit breaker. So it's essentially the same. It is the same thing. In fact, in some ways, it's even more draconian than other countries. So it's so we were in that for 2 weeks, and then on Tuesday night, the government did an announcement again where they said we're going to extend to the 1st of June. So that was a big disappointment for everybody, to be honest. They've become stricter on where we can go and exercise. Parks have been closed. So yeah, it's it's difficult, and I think we'll be in the same situation. UK have done a similar thing of extending. I think Spain have just done the same. So the lockdown thing is a depressing thing. I live on my own. I'm okay on my own, but it's certainly, you do miss human contact, and I don't know if anyone knows really what's going to happen. I mean, all businesses are affected, no matter what you say. I mean, we've got Netflix as a client, but Netflix is doing very well and increasing the size of their team.
I just heard that Netflix...
the general vibe here is quite unusual. I mean, I've seen and read people getting angry. I mean, I'm a New Zealander by birth, so you read about what happens in New Zealand. I mean, there have been some bad things too, but you generally get a sense of New Zealand, everyone helping and being kind. The Prime Minister kept talking about always be kind. So I see in Singapore there was some angry people there who don't like being told they have to do things differently. So, but we're only 2 weeks in. Things will change. I'm sure people will get used to it, or not. But the big question is whether or not lockdowns work, and whether or not we just have to open up, because the physical effects, the economic effects of the lockdown are far more than people getting sick. There's going to be depression. There's people out of work. There's people on the streets. There's going to be people with no food. Health will deteriorate anyway. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of questions, and essentially, I think for us in business is we stop trying to second guess. We just wake up the next day, look at our watch at 7 o'clock, and go, right, how's the day changed? What can we do, and how do we adapt? And that's all we can do.
Yeah, yeah, good point. And also, I think going back to Netflix as well, you also mentioned, they're your client. I think last week, or no, the other day, they just posted
that's right.
This incredible
double the numbers. Yeah, for sure. And they've actually increased, and it was in that article as well, they've actually increased their marketing spend. So when we're seeing that, we're doing a lot of we're doing their first bunches of social media here in APAC. So there's a lot of stuff happening with them. We have Facebook as a client also, which we thankfully just signed on the dotted line before all this happened. So they've been giving us some small jobs to do post. So that's been great. But obviously the majority of our work is in producing film and content, and that has seriously been compromised. So our clients, Dyson, Unilever, the National Gallery here, all have pulled all of their work, and that's substantial numbers. So yeah, I mean, we've been, like I said, mentioned earlier, we've made a few restructures to keep things going. We just don't know what will happen in May. Maybe we'll have to relook at the books again and see what's coming in. I mean, we've got some things, but they're definitely not as busy as we normally are.
Yep. And actually, before I would love to get into more about what's happening over in Chimney, which is the company you're currently working with at the moment. But just to give everyone who's listening, who's watching, a bit of a background of what you do and who you are and why you're in Singapore.
I mean, I've got quite a journey in the Marcom's advertising industry. I started off client side at Diageo, the drinks company, where I started as a salesperson. But because I guess wore loud shirts, did a lot of DJing, I moved into the world of sponsorship, music sponsorship, fashion world sponsorship in London, in the UK. When they went under a number of restructures, I then left and sort of set myself up as a gun for hire to come up with creative strategies in order to win pitches. So all the companies, all the agencies who wanted to get Diageo as a client basically would ring me up and go, right, well, this whole new world of music sponsorship, the arts, how do we do that? And so this is where the whole experiential marketing thing came about. So I got into brand experience in about the year 2000. And
that would have been back in infancy stage, right?
Yes. I mean, the word wasn't even bandied about then. It was more sponsorship leverage or brand events or corporate events or whatever. But and then in 2006, I moved back to New Zealand from the UK and saw that nobody was really doing it in New Zealand at the time, and managed to set up my own agency there. So I built an agency from scratch in 2007. Had Vodafone as my first client, and the client who was at Vodafone is now my MD here at Chimney. Ironically, that's how the journey goes. But no, so I set up an agency there. We went growing to be probably one of the biggest experiential agencies in APAC. And then after doing that for 10 years in New Zealand, a bit longer than that, 13 years, I decided we'd built up a content creation studio. We'd built up a social media studio. We were moving into digital, and content was a big part of everything that we were doing because we were filming brand experiences. So I got quite heavily involved in content, won a few awards for some campaigns that I'd created and produced. And a job opportunity came up here with Chimney, as I said, through my old client. She said, look, I need someone up here to come and be a creative strategist and a business director. and I still kept my shareholding in the businesses in New Zealand, and then decided to move up to Asia. It was just an exciting opportunity that I really couldn't turn down. So I've been here for a year at Chimney. We've done amazingly well, pretty much almost doubled the size of the agency in 12 months, creating really beautiful, engaging, and storytelling creative. We really hone in on that storytelling USP for us. Is we've got some great documentary filmmakers on our team, and we create really amazing stories for brands through digital content.
Great. That's a really good segue into, I guess, today's topic, which is, why context is really important when it comes to content, creating that story.
For sure.
Yeah, I mean, what's your thoughts with regards to the current situation with COVID and how brands are responding through content, through messaging?
I think on the whole, they're doing really well. I think it's hard. I mean, there are so many human stories out there to tell anyway. There really are. Your mum at home with the kids running around while she's trying to run a multi-million-dollar business. Some of the memes we've seen pop up, there's great content and stories that are already happening out there. And I think it hasn't been hard as a creative strategist or a creative director to look at some of that and go, well, we've got a team of people. I think IKEA did a great one recently. TVWA made an ad with all their staff from the agency using IKEA products at home. And, it was a nice little story. So there are those human stories out there that are becoming more important as we are so now digitally connected. We're not human connected anymore. So the approach, I think, has gone really well. A lot of the stories of our frontline health workers out there have been very powerful. Some of the NGOs, Women's Aid in the UK did a great video about the amount of domestic abuse that's happening. And that was all shot because there was no one on the streets. I mean, you've got to remember that creating stories and content at the moment is very hard. You have to either shoot it at home or go out on the street and just film people not doing very much or empty streets. So you've really got to be far more creative in your storytelling now. So, and most people are shooting they might have some gear at home, or, you can't go and rent gear. So it's cameras that you've already got. It's your iPhone. It's different ways of doing things now. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's been a great response overall. I don't think there's been one or two that have fallen a bit flat. Some have been a bit too over brandy, talking too much about the brand and the product rather than what's going on at the moment. But then on the other side of things, it's been over a month now. We don't want to keep hearing about the virus. We don't want to keep hearing about how miserable it is. So we need some positivity, and there's been a lot of ads that are just focusing on positive stuff and some of those more human, funny moments and stories. So, I think it's been, and again, I think one of your questions will come up later is it's about that context. This understanding is what is the right message now. The right message that's coming out now in 2 weeks' time might be completely inappropriate. We might have, God willing, we might have a vaccine or something, some miracle might happen in 2 weeks' time. We've already got a story about how horrendous it is living and working at home or something. But, that might change in 2 weeks. Things keep changing. I think we came up with a whole lot of ideas a month ago, and we canned most of them by now because we realized that A, too many other people are doing the same message. B, things have changed. We probably need to be moving more quickly with our insights. We need to be looking at those insights, looking at our segments, our audience segments. What are their needs? What are they feeling now, and what do they want to feel as part of that briefing process? So yeah, I mean, it's just changing rapidly, and that's the hardest thing. That is the hardest thing.
Yeah, you're totally right, because, what I'm seeing a lot of brands do, you're seeing small businesses trying to follow it. But the problem is because they, operation-wise, and maybe you can talk about this as well, like, running a business, running a brand, running an agency, operation-wise, having to react to that can be really difficult and can be really, really hard. And I think for small businesses, they sometimes see it as like, we should be able to do it straight away. But they don't understand, Actually, there's
Well,
quite a lot of
I'm
things.
sure you probably had the same thing too, but we all had that issue about what's the email we send to our clients. Do we send them another boring email going, connecting, I hope you're well in these difficult and challenging times. That's the opening line. Who wants to see that again? And then you've got, we're open as business as usual. We hope you're well. We actually just held off. We didn't do an email because we just wanted to wait again, because things were changing so rapidly. What are clients going to need? 1 minute we were able to shoot film here in Singapore, and then within 5 days that was taken away from us. So we were planning to send an email out to go, we're open for business, we can shoot here. And then of course we couldn't. So it's really, really difficult. And small businesses particularly, that they've got to communicate with their clients, because the clients are going, what's happening? But that tone of voice, that the right message to the right people, it's, it's classic advertising 101, but in these times, you really have to tick those boxes and get it right, I think, to get the right context. It's, it's hard. You have to communicate with your client. But, for us as well, I just got on the phone, It was just simply to the clients, just trying to have a talk to them. How are you? Are you okay? I don't think an email really does that as well. So.
Yeah, you touched on a really good point about humanizing, whether or not you're an agency working with clients or whether or not you're a brand trying to communicate with your customers, humanizing your approach, and therefore kind of changing your tone of voice to suit that environment that you're currently in and the situation.
Absolutely. And I think the other thing we've been talking to a few clients about is that once this is cleared up, the focus will go on brands and it will go on companies going, what did you do during the crisis to help the general public, or to your workers, or what did you guys do? And so, we're encouraging clients to be creating content now. What are you doing for your staff? What are you doing to help out in the community? The CSR side of things here, the employer branding that will come out of this is going to be very, very important post-COVID, because companies will be judged for the way that they treated their staff, their families, and what they were doing for the general public, and how did the toilet paper guys manage to solve the problem in the initial stages, and all of those kind of things, just those, there might be some funny stories there, but those stories will have to be told. And I think that because brands and companies are going to be asked, where were you when, did you lay off loads of staff too quickly? Or, there's going to be a lot of that, particularly.
Yeah. I was talking to a guest previously, and, obviously we both know Ollie as well. But I was talking to a guest, and he also mentioned fear, training your mind to, not fear. And how do you do that? Well, it's part of preparation. And you mentioned it just before, like post-COVID-19, how do brands want to tell their story? How should they tell their story? What is the story being told? And how would a consumer kind of react to it when it's kind of be presented in a certain way as well?
It definitely won't ever be business as usual. It just, looking just miserably reading through the articles on Drum and a few other titles just now on the Marketing Week, and seeing, that budgets are going to be, Coke are not going to spend any money on brand anymore. They're spending money in the retail store. They're spending money with their trade teams to get the sales force out there to sell more products. They're not going to go to these big sweeping brand campaigns about Coke is all about happiness anymore, because at the moment it's actually just about shipping units.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in post-COVID, we're going to see a lot of advertising that will just be about shipping units. And, it'll be really targeted towards retail. It'll be targeted towards digital, about get out there and buy now. And it'll be about price offerings, two bog offs, 2-for-1s. It's really going to be, that's where the marketing spend is going to go. But the other brands, as we were just saying, your bigger corporates, your DBSs, your Singtels, your Keppels, your big global brands are going to want to be showing what they have done for the community. so that they get the loyalty back, to show that I'm going to go to them because they did a great thing for us as Singaporeans or whatever country it is around the world or whatever. But yeah, I mean, it's hard. There's going to be a lot of business units to travel. And obviously, the other thing is that we're going to see a lot of sectors where there won't be any advertising anymore. I mean, airlines, travel, Skyscanner, flight centers, these guys are not going to be around to have advertising spend to travel anymore. I'm not, that again, that's a really big unknown. So, yeah, we're just though that used to be a huge spend. I mean, you look at countries like, I did a seminar the other day with an economist talking about Singapore's economy, and Thailand, Vietnam are very, very, very vulnerable to losing. Tourism's going to, really have a big impact. Thailand, particularly, it's their leading contributor to GDP. Vietnam was up there; it was about second or something, I think. Singapore, not so much, but New Zealand, for example, New Zealand and Australia both need tourist dollar. They also both have huge amounts of money invested in students. Overseas students who live and work at universities in New Zealand, and those things are going to be really, really difficult. So we won't see any of those guys spending. They were big spenders in media in New Zealand, so that's not going to happen. But I guess fruit, things like that will increase. But yeah, it's going to be really, really interesting to see the landscape, and it's hard to predict at the moment.
Yeah, and like you mentioned before, like with these big companies that, what are they going to do? How are they? People will judge them on what they have done for the community and how they've kind of helped them.
Yeah, I think those stories will be really, really important. And there's one. So Nationwide Bank in England did a campaign recently where they actually had. And again, it was shot from home, so they gave a series of, I think it was maybe 5 or 6 couples a phone or a camera, and they could talk about what they thought their financial future was going to be. And that's the Nationwide Bank. So they're kind of going, well, and the end of it was, we're going to help you, because obviously everyone's going to have financial problems. I think one couple were going to get married. Will they be able to afford to get married now? Another couple were, buying a house. Blah, blah, blah. So it's though they were going, look, and I guess the tagline or whatever was, well, the gist of it was that Nationwide, we're going to help to make sure that you can still have your dreams come right. So it was a nice, and again, it was all shot at home, seemed very natural, had a nice message to it. So, it's those kind of stories. Again, they're human stories that people need to hear, that if when done right, will give brand empathy towards a company or a brand.
Yeah, and I think when those big brands kind of come out and they start, like the Flight Centers, the Corporate Travelers, which is the B2B arm of Flight Center. Yeah, when they start advertising, I truly believe like those big brands will revert back to their USP, and there'll probably be a little bit of nationalism. So, for instance, I would probably suspect brands will be talking about what, how they're important to this particular nation. Like, we employ
people here, keeping it connected to the world.
Keeping connected,
yeah. Well, I think a lot of the airlines are going to be nationalized anyway, from what I understand. I think governments are going to have to bail them out to extraordinary lengths. I know Singapore hasn't had that situation because the investors of Singapore actually all put money in themselves, which was a remarkable thing in this world to do, because the government's usually saving everyone. Yeah, New Zealand, however, has got something like a $3 billion bailout, so they're kind of owned by the government now. So as you said, I think it will be very much about local travel, helping local people to do that. But I think the business that you're talking about, the business class market, that's just not going to exist, because nobody's going to be able to afford to pay those prices now.
Yep.
Nobody's really going to be able to want to travel. I mean, we're doing, so we can still shoot in China, Taiwan, and Sweden at the moment. So we're doing remote film productions. We've created the technology where a director in Vietnam can look through the lens on his screen and actually direct a film from Vietnam. the client could be in Singapore. The client can see what's going on, make comments. So there are ways that we're calling it film production 3.0, because in the future there's not going to be the budgets to ship a crew of 10 people halfway around the world to shoot. We'll be able to send a cameraman, and we'll be able to send a DOP, and they'll set it up, and everyone will just stay where they are and direct. Because countries like New Zealand, for example, they're not going to let people in for 2 years. So it's the travel bans are going to be extensive, so people just won't be able to travel.
Yeah. And also, I think the hierarchy of needs have changed. So as a business, and I've said this before in other videos, having to redo your customer journey, who your customers are from the get-go. You might have like a specific, broad customer type, but their pain points have completely changed. So their needs have completely changed.
And we don't, the impact on unemployment, we're guessing on that too. And if we're finding that double figures of unemployed people, you don't really want to be going around flouting wealth and things like that in the community where potentially hundreds of thousands of people are unemployed. So, or millions in the case of America. So it's about all of these need states are going to change. All of the segments, I would imagine, will change. We're all using data and insights always to segment who your target markets are and what their needs are. But what are these? Like you're saying, if in the future gyms don't exist anymore, are we going to have these super healthy? Is that an audience profile that's kind of going to go out the window a little bit? I mean, everything's just going to change.
Yeah, exactly. And I think also you're also seeing shifts not only from a customer point of view, but also the way of which brands need to operate in order to stay in business. And that's coming from like big corporations all the way down to like your local restaurant on how they have to pivot their business model in order to survive. And it's crazy at the moment.
Very much so. And look, everyone's having to do it. It's just even people who aren't working are having to pivot their lives. It's just the word's overused, but it is what's happening.
Yeah.
So
definitely. Like some of the things I've been talking to some of my clients about have been, hey, let's work towards protecting what you already have in terms of your business, in terms of your brand identity.
Yeah.
First and foremost. Let's, and Oliver used a really good word, like, doing a bit of surgery on your brand, trying to understand your stats, your numbers, using those kind of...
You've got time now, so now's the time to do it. And in fact, Mark Ritson, he's like a marketing guru. He does English marketing guru, very funny guy, but he does these great seminars. He's just done one. I'll send you the link. But he was saying the same thing. Like, if you've got... Now is really, sadly, the time to reassess. If you've got lots of bricks and mortar stores, is it time for you to get rid of most of those stores? If you've got a suite of 20 brands and 8 of them don't really work that well, but you've been keeping them along just to keep your portfolio and frontage and store going, maybe it's time to kill those off now, so no one will ever remember them up post this anyway. So it's opportunities now to look, and as you said, really look in detail at what brands you've got, your strategies, your whole business strategy. Do these brands, products, and the way we deliver, are they relevant anymore? Like if it is a Coca-Cola and they've got loads of health drinks for sports, sports is stuffed at the moment. So, and there's not going to be a lot of coverage around sports, and so therefore, do you start pulling back on sports drinks? I don't know, but it's everything's changing.
Well, speaking about sports, have you seen some of the things that some of the sporting industries have tried to pivot? So you see Formula One, they're starting to do e-racing. The V8 supercars just did that.
I have, and I've got a lot of contacts in the e-gaming world. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I don't want to be a naysayer because it might happen, but I like the responses that I've been hearing are that the big boys like your Lewis Hamiltons won't do the driving one, unless they're paid a lot of money. Maybe then when they get paid a lot of money they will, but that I can't see that replacing. Even though I know it's going massive, for my friend who runs the gaming league in New Zealand, he just said it's gone crazy gangbusters. And I was already working with him a few years ago on getting brands into those games to as a sponsorship partnership. But it's yeah, because there are just some people who aren't gamers like that. I mean, that's me. I mean, I like watching people play games. I must admit that is fun. I did watch the Formula One race, but I definitely didn't feel the same.
No, but I think by doing that, it allows a brand to still stay relevant in this mainstream kind of.
Yeah, I agree. But then they won't. Yeah, and they won't be having to spend anywhere near as much money. Yeah. So they're providing relevance, of course. Yeah, I mean that's definitely true. But I think a lot of it for sport lovers, I mean, even though you've seen low attendances at football matches and rugby matches and cricket matches, there's been lower attendances. I think what will happen post COVID with sport is that everyone will start going to the games again because they want to be, if they allow people into the games, of course, this is another what if, but because people want that human, I want to hear the real people shouting in my ear. I want to see a guy over there making a funny joke in the crowd, or so, you want to be part of that crowd experience. So I don't know. It's yeah. I mean, I think game sport, esports is definitely going to go through the roof after all of this, but it's just not for everybody.
No,
but, that's me. I think there's a yeah.
Hey, going back to the context of business operations and like developing content that's regular, that's reliable, to the audience and that's relevant as well. Do you think have you heard the term coined like zero moment of truth and micro content?
No, you can go on. You can talk a little bit about that if you like. I've got some other stuff, but
yeah. So the term around micro content is fully like understanding who your audience is, and then understanding the context of which what kind of media that they type and consume, and then making like creating micro content based on those little instances where they may or may not have interaction within that particular media stream or medium as itself. Yep. And I just find how you said before, how the situation's changed so much and it's changing so rapidly that it's almost hard to do forward planning because it could change at any moment in time.
I mean, I'll give you an example. You've got micro content, I've got macro content, because we're finding we've got a client who's just briefed us to create. They're a luxury beauty brand. We just mentioned it. They want 4 episodic films. So they don't want a short form. We will make short form content out of it, but they want 4 episodes that could go to make potentially a 4-minute film.
Right.
So you're seeing, actually, because people are now used to being on here on these screens, and they're going, okay, well, I've got a few minutes. I've got a couple of, if it's 4 90-second videos, I've got time for that. And then I'd like to watch them all together and see what the whole film is about. So people are now, and also I guess with everyone switching to binge watching Tiger King on Netflix, they're used to watching episodes back to back. They won't just watch one bit of content. They'll go, oh, what's going to happen in part 2? What's going to happen in part 3? So it builds up these episodes, and the ways of watching are changing. I really believe that. And that's going to help us to create more dynamic stories, and it will help brands because they want to create more human stories. So I think it's a good thing. The other thing with content that we're doing at the moment is, and obviously with the lockdown situation, not being able to shoot, is looking at ways where we can reuse assets. So someone like Pizza Hut, lots of assets, lots of photos of pizzas, lots of stuff in the background. We can do things with that content in our post-production studios using VFX or all kinds of stuff that will still be able to use that in a new way that the audience won't notice, and potentially give them a whole new message, save them a lot of money, save them a lot of time, certainly save them on traveling and having to go and do anything for shooting. So, someone mentioned it to me the other day. In some ways, we call it reuse, recycle, and recreate, but it's actually almost like a recycling thing. We're actually saving the environment by not having to travel, not having to go and shoot. We're just reusing some old stock, and it can be done. So again, there are different ways that content can be used now, and even if we did it in short form or long form, there are ways and means of doing it without us having to go and shoot right And I think we're trying to convince, get clients to go, okay, well, this is good. We have got a great bank of stuff over the last 2 years. The problem is no one knows where it's stored. There's different agencies have got it, but it's about pulling it all together into one big platform where we can go, right, well, let's adapt it to different markets. Adapt it for you for different messages, for your different audiences, and for your different formats that you need across channels. So, yeah.
Wow. Yeah, actually, you bring up a good point about recycling and leveraging existing assets. I think for small businesses, I know we were talking about like larger big corporations, but I think for small
businesses particularly have got that opportunity. I think, and they have to look to that. I mean, the problem we always find, and this is why at Chimney we built a whole content housing system for clients, but called Edison. But the problem is that these assets get made by agency 1, agency 2, agency 3. It's distributed to media agency 1, media agency D. So it just gets dispersed, whereas the client can't actually see it. It's not housed in one particular and dynamic content creation portal. So they don't know where. That's the problem, really, is half the clients don't know where the content is. They're like, oh, we'd love to do work with you, Mark, but I don't know. TBWA, they've got most of it, I think. And then you ring up TBWA and they're going, yeah, we've got it, but I don't know where it is. It was like from a year ago, it's gone. They just don't house their assets. And again, looking to the future of content is going to be about how it's stored and managed and how it's to save money, again, keeping all your assets in one place that everybody around the world can access at any one time and create and adapt to their own marketplaces, their own messages, their own the different formats and different channels they need. So that we see as being a really big future, and we've invested heavily in that technology. So we've already got a number of clients using it, but that whole use of content housing and distribution tech is definitely going to be a big part of the future.
Yep. Do you think experiential marketing still has its place though?
Oh boy, that one. That's a hard one for me. Look, it will always have its place, and as an eternal optimist, I'm hoping that in the Southern Hemisphere summer, in December through to March this coming end of year, we will see that the lockdown is over and people will want to get out and feel part of a human experience. So whether that's a music festival, as I mentioned before, whether they want to go to the sport, whether they just want to go to the beach and play volleyball, or team sports again, but music festivals, fashion shows, those cultural things that we used to do as a group, because that's where experiential starts, at that hub. Cinema is an experience. So I'm hopeful that will happen by the end of the year. However, well, for the Southern Hemisphere, up in the Northern Hemisphere, there's nothing going to happen till winter now. I mean, they've called off all those sporting events. There's all the Olympics have been moved. The European Football Championship's been moved. So all the music festivals in the UK and Europe have been cancelled. So, if that doesn't happen, then there's not going to be anything in the Northern Hemisphere by way of events, apart from maybe rugby and soccer, obviously, over the winter. But will there be companies around in 6 months' time to take advantage of that? I severely doubt it. And if there are, they will be only 10%, I think, 10 or 20% of the original numbers that were there before. I think that those guys would have either had to pivoted into content, or maybe shopper marketing, doing stuff doing marketing inside a supermarket, or they'll all become independent consultants in experiential. I think experiential is going to have an extremely important part to play moving forward once this is all over, and once we know how people can go and socialize while still being socially distant. I see, for example, sporting events where at the gate everyone will have a temperature track, same as what we were doing before, where when you go out to a shop they temperature check and you've got to fill out the form. I think we're going to have that, and I would imagine if you're in a stadium, you're probably going to be a seat apart from everyone who's not in your own from your own bubble. I think that's how they're going to have to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen so many, especially like reading some of the articles in Australia, in New Zealand, in like, I guess, the Western world. You're seeing all these like applications, trace apps that governments are trying to issue to provide transparency and safety. But then you see these civil libertarians jumping up and down saying this is against our right, da 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 da. And I'm like, well, it kind of calls
Google's been following you around for ages.
Yeah. Exactly, and we're all comfortable with it. It's like, guys, we're trying to actually, the government is actually trying to do something good. Yes, it does border on the line of tracking, but guys, what's the alternative? Everyone gets sick. Do we want like another, like Spanish flu situation or cholera situation where just everyone gets it? It's like, come on, guys. We've got this technology. You would think people back in the day would, if they had the ability to use this technology and they know they're using it for good, they'll probably be using it as well. We just happen to be living in a tech.
Well, I mean, and I know a lot of people who worked in the experiential and event game who had built technology around. So, for example, if you went into a music festival, you'd have an RFID wristband, and that would track you around the festival, mainly so that it knew who were the most popular bands, who were the most popular brands at the festival, how much engagement time did they spend with each brand. So there is a lot of ways to capture data. No one minded that either. I mean, it is a funny old world. And again, this is all good. The technology side of those things is going to change. It really is. We'll really have to see. I mean, as I said, I can't see governments wanting to keep a lockdown going for longer than 2 months because economies will dissolve. So you're either going to have to open it up to people getting sick until there's a vaccine, and if that's the case, then we won't be going to large-scale events or music concerts or being in a bar or anything like that. So,
and I think that's gonna, like, I think if I was a betting man, streaming services will come into play, especially for sporting.
Of course, events. And so I actually had a similar Q&A last night with an experiential company who'd asked me to make some comments on Experiential and what I think the future is. And I know a few companies in the UK are doing VR. They're doing a virtual experience. The problem with that is it's very solo. You can be in a room with 20 other people, but really you're still in your own headset. You're not there. So I don't know how they'll go. I mean, I'm hoping that that'll work. And a lot of them are multi-sensory. There's smells, there's feelings, and so I mean, there's a lot of I'm actually working with another guy at the moment. He on the Waldorf project, and he's doing a large-scale event. We're hoping to get some support from Viva or from Oculus to give us some headsets to try this new way of doing an experience. So. Yeah, it's interesting. We will just have to see how that pans out. But I think at some point when they're talking about the V curve or whatever the curve looks like will also be a thing where people just want to be around humans and they want to not just go over to their mate's house and have a few drinks and play games or whatever. They want to actually go and do stuff. And we won't be able to travel anymore. So that doing stuff will be sports, it'll be music, it'll be fashion, it'll be arts. And that's where, because we can't go to, we won't be able to go to Thailand anymore. We won't be able to go, and not cheaply. So you might as well be doing something in your own backyard.
Yep. I want to kind of get back to how brands can adapt to this situation, this COVID situation. And I think you mentioned it really well earlier around consolidation of, like, from a storytelling point of view, like the assets that you currently have, how can you reuse, recycle them as well? But I think one thing that you also touched on was around technology, in the sense of kind of understanding the insights to craft those story arcs before you do it.
Yeah. And we're going to be getting a lot more of that through the way that people are so now intrinsically attached to their devices. Their data should be a massive part of what brands are using now. However, and it came through on a couple of briefs and pitches that we came to last year. One was for Unilever, one was for another brand. They presented, as part of the briefing process, all of these insights, all the data that was coming through from digital, from Google, and reams of data. And then they stopped us in the brief, and they just went, "Look, but here's the most important thing. It doesn't matter what algorithms we use. It doesn't matter what media spend we put behind this on Facebook. It doesn't matter what data we use to target accurately our audience. Whatever content you produce, it has to be at the height of its creativity, because creativity is and particularly once cookies start to go, and now they're already going, it's going to be the creativity that will get your audience to hook into content. It might be targeted towards you, but you're not going to stop your thumb scrolling unless you go, oh, those first 2 seconds look interesting. Unless it's crafted beautifully, unless there's a really human story to it that you want to get emotionally engaged to. So it's still, not that I'm not poo-pooing data and data-led insights at all, because we rely on them, of course. But the guys at Unilever, as part of their brief, put out, Bernbach's great quote about creativity is everything. Then they put up another quote from Google, kind of basically going, we're not going to put anything up on our platform that isn't creative. They're not going to accept it anymore, because they know that there's none of the cookies, there's none of this chasing around of data. It's just, you're going to find that it's only the best shit that people are going to watch now.
Yeah, you're right. And also, like, I think there's got to be that fine balance, and you just kind of mentioned it, right? Like that fine balance between what kind of data we're going to use to inform us, but then what's the creative element that's going to inspire and evoke?
Well, that creativity's got to come from those insights. It really does. And if you ignore your insights at your peril. And I guess that's what's helped us to win the pitches. Really understanding the audience, really understanding the consumer journeys. Where are those touch points for brands out in the marketplace now? I mean, it's all on here. But it's where are these customer journeys in the post-COVID world, even for channels like outdoor, if people aren't on the road anymore, how is that working? How are we getting ROI off that? Digital and social will continue to rise in that sense. It's about making sure that through those you're selecting the right channels for your audience. Is another one, of course, is that the number of arguments you have with your client because you don't really understand your audience. It's not the right channel for them to be on. It's interesting.
Yeah. Do you think there'll be some test and learn? Like I know there will always be test and learn. However, the volume of test and learn and the variety of how people use that word in their marketing campaigns. We're just test and learn.
I think we spoke about it a little bit earlier. Things are changing so much. You could test and learn something today that next week may not be the case anymore.
Yeah.
This is that difficulty of testing for consumer behaviors and insights is really challenging at the moment. I'm not sure how they're doing it. I mean, because we could be doing something and being testing and learning now, do a whole week of testing, spend another week of learning, another week of pulling the report together to send to a client, and then we live in a whole new world. It's very, very difficult. And I think a lot of time the marketers are going with their gut and if they're experienced, it really does come down to that. But the test and learn, I think as we start to see more continuity and patterns into what this post world is going to look like, then certainly it's going to be absolutely massive. But at the moment, I mean, I've got my own pessimistic views on, we're testing behaviors that are just changing so quickly.
Yeah. I think you mentioned it. I think you put it really good, which is brands will have to go back to what they're good at. What's their USP? What do they want to stand for? And therefore derive creativity from that.
And you and Ollie said the same thing. It's time now to really put the brand under the microscope and really go back to what was their original business plan. I mean, we probably haven't looked at that for years, but what is our brand's business plan and what is the essence of our brand? And then look at all the communications that we do. Are we actually on point with all of these, or are some of it we've been doing tactically, so therefore it didn't really matter if it was on message, but that's the time now to consolidate that and make sure, particularly I think for brands who are going to do a lot of tactical work now, they don't want to do the big brand build. They're going to be doing, a lot of trade marketing. They're going to be doing a lot of stuff in retail below the line. They're going to go below the line in a lot of their work because that's what drives immediate revenue. If that's the case, if they're doing a lot of tactical work, then that tactical work has to have a consistent brand message, because then people will still reflect back to the brand. And I think that is where the challenge will be, that they're not just doing something really ticky-tacky over here in Thailand, just it's been churned out, and then we do a really sophisticated piece here in Singapore or something. These brand messages across the region are going to have to be really well coordinated, so that that brand love and that essence of the brand isn't lost on the consumer for the longer term. So when they're not just buying stuff because it's on sale, or it's there's a good deal, or there's a promo on, it's 2 or 3 years down the track where they still want to go, oh yeah, I'm Coke. I remember Coke. They still had a really nice message behind, even though I was getting it 2 for 1. They still had a really nice look and feel. There was still it still felt good,
Yeah. Hey, bring back, I mean, you've been in the industry for such a long time, like 25 plus years. You would have seen some great campaigns, great ad campaigns, great experiential campaigns. What's one that kind of sticks to mind right now, given this current situation, this turbulence that we're currently in?
I think, the one of the best brands that kind of totally reinvented themselves, and I was at Diageo for part of this, was Guinness, and who took a brand that was considered to be really quite old-fashioned. I mean, who drinks a black stout? It wasn't considered to be cool. It was never poured properly. In a pub, people would just pour it. You're supposed to, I mean, I don't know if you've had a Guinness, but if you drink Guinness, you're supposed to let it rest for up to 30 seconds. So I guess what they did, and we're just talking about it, is that the insight that they actually came about from the fact that they realized that if you're going to pour a good Guinness, you've got to wait for it. So you've got to wait for a Guinness to be poured. It takes a while. The head comes up, and then you've got to wait for a minute, and then you've got to pour it back. So the whole essence was good things come to those who wait. And so in the bars, everybody with all the coasters, all the pull down pourers, they all had a thing going, please wait. Good things come to those who wait. So that was a tactical below the line approach. But then their mainstream advertising, I don't know if you remember the film with the surfers, where they're just waiting for the best wave to come, and these stallions will come out of the wave. It's one of the most famous commercials. It's got music by Left Field, and in the late 90s, early 2000s, it was just seen as it's the height of advertising. And because they'd linked all of that stuff together and all those insights, and around who the audience was, they wanted to actually get young people to drink it who'd never really drunk it. But once they had some cool music with it, it was about surfing. I mean, that doesn't really happen with a brand like that. They really transformed the performance of that product right through the roof. And then other brands copied it, like Gordon's Gin did that similar thing, where they had to take your time to make a gin, to make it properly. And then, of course, they did some really nice ads in the cinemas where you get the smells of gin while you're watching a movie. But it's just kind of ways of looking at insights, ways of going through the line with your marketing, realizing it's not just about what goes on at the point of purchase, it's also about the brand. That whole, again, relying to make sure that brand feeling is coming through everything that you're communicating.
Yep.
And to me, that's pretty much that's of all my time in advertising, that's definitely the strongest that I've seen and worked on. But
yeah, nice. I know we're running out of time, and I know you've had some really great gems with regards for brands, both large and small. Looking at looking at the current stats, but also deriving creativity from it, but also looking at the old assets and recycling and making them new. What are a couple of other kind of tactical things, for brands to look at, whether or not you're a brand, like you're a creative director, you're a decision maker in an organization, or you're just the lowly, well, not lowly, but you're the producer, you're the guy that's actually doing the work inside the brand. What kind of things that perhaps they should be thinking about in terms of potentially pivoting and preparing post-COVID?
Yeah, I mean, I think on the preparing side, and we talked about it a little bit earlier, but at the moment, communication is just critical. And I don't mind if a supplier or someone phones me up at the moment, because I'm just glad to talk to somebody. So, I think at the very nut and kernel of all of this is connectivity and communication, and reaching out to your stakeholders, your networks, your partners to creativity comes from networks, and whether they be the networks of our brain or networks of ideas that we've seen from other people in other times, but also networks of creative people that you know. And I think it's really important this time that everybody keeps connected. And you're doing a great job here as well. Just doing these webinars and kind of just showing ways that people are thinking. Can we connect with them? Let's have a chat. I think that's critical, number one, and that's for brands too, is getting all of their stakeholders. I know brands at the moment who are there's another company out there. They're renting cameras. They're coming into the building and they're filming. Again, they're making their own content at home. It's not super great quality, but someone's doing an edit on it and it'll look fine. So people are still trying. It's just constantly always thinking. I think half my day now is spent reading what's going on around the world in our industry to try to pick up some kernels of ideas that we can then share. And again, it's our own research and our own data and our own insights and finding out and testing and seeing what's working. I think that that they're really critical. But the other thing is, if you're a brand manager or a business owner, if someone comes to you with an idea, is give them the 5 minutes to have an elevator pitch, because you just don't know if that idea isn't going to change your business. You just don't really know if that idea isn't going to be one that's going to tell your human story about your brand, that's going to change the way your staff view your company, that your clients view your company, that your customers view your company. So I think that those are the most important things. But also, I think we've had to think we had to think of 3 new products for us, because we produce shoots. We can't get away from that. So we had to go, right, okay, why not reuse, recycle, and repurpose? So that's great. We've got that. We've also got this remote production thing where we've built the technology where you can actually look through the lens of a camera and remote shoot. So we've had to think of all that. We've designed and built that. And then again, we're just going, okay, we've got the best post-production studio here in APAC. Let's just do a lot of more animation. Let's do infographics. Let's make things a little bit more fun and interesting. It's just, you've got to see what you've got and work. And, for the experiential businesses, it's the same sort of thing. It's like, what have we got? Okay, we've been working VR for a while. Let's start making some VR content. Let's get some VR stuff happening where people don't always lose the experience. Let's live stream a band. Let's live stream a footballer that we know doing some keepy uppy or something. And doing a Q&A in that sense. But it's just about trying constantly to be creative and to think and use your networks to make that happen.
Yeah, great. I think I really like how you like, hey, we got to constantly keep trying, pushing new things out, but it doesn't have to be as polished as it needs to be. Like a couple of quick edits here and there, but let's just try and get this content out. Let's see how people respond.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, it does have to have a certain amount of goodness to it. Depends on, again, it's who your audience is.
Yeah.
The guys I know who are doing the filming themselves are B2B, so the quality is not always needed to be as you would B2C, perhaps. But even then, we've seen so many brands just giving people a camera at home and then the edit suite take it and they turn it into something really beautiful. So we can do, any content creation studios, that's what they can do. They can take an idea, make it work somehow, and bring it to life. And I think, that creativity, whether that's working with a creative agency to sit down on their idea and how to make it work, or whether we come up with that idea or you come up with it, it's kind of the thinking of the ways and means that we can make it happen.
Yeah. And I think you come to a really good point, and the reason why you want to have an external creative agency involved, because they're able to not only give you the technical aspects, you can shoot it this way, it doesn't have to be polished, but this is the message, this is the consistency in terms of the message we want to present. Correct. So it's always constantly.
And also, I think, like you do, we're always making sure that we're using the insights that we've got, because they are changing so rapidly, that we've got the information that we need to come up with a clear response to a brief. It's that it's being briefed properly on our audiences, on those insights that we've got, looking at the data that we can then use to come up with a really good idea. But it's about then ensuring that your content response can be A/B tested, make sure that we can change and adapt, because again, that's just going to be so important. I mean, every time we produce content now, we're just creating so much of it that it can be A/B tested, because we know that in this world now, we might have to have a different message in 2 weeks. So,
yeah, definitely. And on that note, I think we'll finish it off here. For anyone that's listening, feel free to put any likes and comments. But just before we go, Mark, if they want to reach out to you, what's the best place to reach out to you?
You can get me here at Chimney Group. So it's just mark.pickering@chimneygroup.com. So, I mean, you can probably share it up there at the end as well on online. I'm also on LinkedIn, just Mark Pickering. You'll probably find me pretty easy there at Chimney. They're probably the best two spots to get me.
Hey, so that was my talk with Mark Pickering, and there was a few things that resonated with me. First and foremost, the importance of storytelling to humanize a brand, especially for large organizations that that have the resources to do good things or positive things for the community. They will be looked upon post-COVID as, what did they do during this particular crisis? And I think that perception is going to be very, very important when it comes to the development of that brand post-COVID. The second thing, the recycle, reuse, and recreate with regards to using, your assets to either keep that consistent storytelling going and even potentially creating new stories out of it. Finally, the ability for brands to foster speaking out when it comes to improving the customer experience or creating the business outcome as well. I think that's really, really important. So they're just a couple of my things, well, actually a few of my things that came out of it. Hope you guys got value out of it too, and I'll see you in the next video.